Okay, guys. Are we streaming?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's a wonderful lunch, and it'll be hard to speak after that, but I won't be speaking for long. We're also, we're gonna keep you busy. So I thought I'd also just mention, I forgot to mention before, the prayers that we did at the beginning, which were very quick, maybe 15 minutes. So those are called, they're part of what we call the prayers of the hours of the church. That was the 6th hour. And those prayers of the hours are taken over from Judaism, because you read about them in the New Testament. You'll see that Jesus met the Samaritan woman, for instance, at the 6th hour. The Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples and apostles at the 3rd hour. Jesus was crucified at the 6th hour. He died at the 9th hour. And so they're very important moments in the day. And they were always times of prayer. So the Christians took those times of prayer and they brought them into the church because Jesus fulfilled those times. Particularly the 3rd hour when the Holy Spirit came down, the 6th hour when Jesus was crucified, and the 9th hour when he died. So the prayers will often, particularly during Great Lent, the prayers of the hours are longer. And they have some hymns in them that relate specifically to the times in the life of Christ and the church that I just mentioned. But outside of Great Lent, they're quite short. But they begin with 3 psalms, and they have some hymnography and obviously the Holy God. And but these are prayers that you can do throughout the day, especially those of you that are retired or, if you're not working. But I used to go, especially during Great Lent when I was working at Mutual of Omaha corporate offices in Omaha, Nebraska. I used to go into a room and just do the 6th hour prayers at lunchtime. So the 1st hour of the day is 6 a.m. The 3rd hour is 9 a.m. 6th hour is 12 noon. And 9th hour is 3 p.m. And that's how the Jews did it. They went in blocks of 3 hours. And then during the evening, there's 4 watches during the night. 4 watches of 3 hours. So when it says Jesus came to the disciples at the 4th watch of the night, that's somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So anyway, if you're not familiar with that, that's what those prayers of the hours are. And they are meant to help us sanctify the time, because time is a creature, but it's a fallen creature now because of the fall of Adam and Eve and because of sin. And so time has to be sanctified. And that's part of the sanctification of time that we have in the church. And if we were doing all the services of the church, then you would see all of those hours being done. And if you would like to take the 6th-hour prayers there at the back, in the narthex on the hutch there, you can take a copy. Except that those are the ones that you do with the priest. I can send you by email, I can send you a copy that you can do without the priest. So it doesn't have the priest parts and so forth. That would be better. Okay, so we're here to talk a little bit about manhood in the Orthodox understanding. And I will tell you that there's very little that's written in English about being a man, an Orthodox man. St. Paisios of Mount Athos, it's right there, died in 1994. He has a book, they have a compilation of his writings about family life. I have not read that whole thing yet, but I'm not sure that he has a chapter on being a man. I think part of it is because everybody used to know how that worked. And it wasn't something you read, it was something you learned by watching, right? And I should say today that, you know, we're just going to scratch the surface on some things where we can't be comprehensive by any means. And this isn't going to be some kind of systematic talk about how you can be a man and what that is and what it looks like. It'd be better to read the lives of the saints, and you'll find that out, I think, in a better way, a more tangible way. But we will say some things about it. And forgot what I was going to say.
Do we have to defend our right, or whatever we are, our character of being a man in today's culture? Do we have to defend that now as it's being challenged by multiple fronts?
Well, it's a great question, and you're kind of getting way ahead.
Okay, I don't want to go there.
Of something that I don't even know I'm going to address.
I know, it's tough, but...
because you're opening up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, it is. But we have to be able to deal with it in our culture.
Yeah.
Because it's Orthodox. We have to have a response to it. So, down the road.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump to a quote by St. Paisios, because there are some things that he says that do relate to this topic. And this is an excerpt from some larger, I'd say just, I don't know, some paragraphs on how he's talking about it. He says, "The spirit of lukewarmness reigns. There's no manliness at all." Now, he's probably writing, I'm guessing he's talking in the, I don't know, I'm guessing the 1980s. That's kind of when I started living as a young man. And it kind of insults me because he's talking about my time period, saying that there's no manliness. Of course, the 1980s is when we wore the short shorts. Even the basketball players in the NBA. See, you should don't ever carry your phone. It sounded like a soap. That's embarrassing. I meant for that to happen just to show the feminization of men. Anyway, in the 1980s, you know, but the music in the 1980s, a lot of it was, this isn't part of my talk, but a lot of it was, I can't live without you. you're the biggest part of me, and you're just completely helpless and incomplete without this woman that you're romantically in love with. It's very, if you listen to a lot of the pop 80s music, it's very kind of feminizing, you know? Maybe the country genre was different, and maybe some of the rock and roll was different, but that probably went to the opposite extreme. Anyway.
We're totally badass though.
Okay. So here's what's continuing with St. Paisios. There's no manliness at all. We've been spoiled for good. How does God still tolerate us? Today's generation is the generation of indifference. There are no warriors. The majority are fit only for parades. So it's kind of an interesting image of parades, you know. You can kind of see that today in the generation of selfies, right? Self-congratulatory, you know. So here's some statistics. Because there is something going on with men in our society. 77% of suicides are men. From 1997 to 2014, there was a 43% increase in suicides among men. 1997 to 2004. Mostly white and Native American, by the way. They're 10 times more likely to commit suicide than African American or Hispanic men. More girls are graduating from high school and college today, and many more are going to graduate school, medical school, and law school. More females than males. 1 in 5 boys are hyperactive. And of course, some are on medication for that. 7 million men don't work currently around, I think, this time. And I don't know how many take pain medication, but a good portion of those take pain medication. 1 in 5 children live with only their mother. That's 20% of children. And that has doubled since from around 1970. Single women buy homes at twice the rate as single men. Half of young male recruits in the Army fail the physical fitness test. 70% of men are obese, opposed to 59% of women. It's not a great percentage for women either. Sperm counts are down 60% from the early 70s. Something's happening in men. Something is happening to manhood. And so our job today is not to figure out exactly what's happening. And I'm sure it's very much multifaceted, but it is definitely a spiritual problem. I think there are definite spiritual elements to this. And it seems to be a crisis of strength. A crisis of strength. And that's what I'm going to kind of lead up to in my first presentation. But first, we're gonna have a little exercise, intellectual exercise, spiritual exercise. So I'm going to ask you to break up into small groups. And I would like you to, with your group, to come up with a consensus as best as you can and give me the top 5 legitimate, true, authentic characteristics or qualities of manhood. And then also the top 5 false kind of characteristics and images of that describe false manhood. Okay, so I think we were gonna do 4 groups. I think we can do 4 groups. Doesn't really divide into, it's about 6 in each group, that's fine. Let's count in 4s. In 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
1,
2, 3,
4,
1, 2, 3,
4,
1, 2,
3,
4,
1, 2, 3,
4, 1, 2,
3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
What if you forgot your number?
You're 13.
Then you are a typical man today. In today's society. You were a 1.
Yep.
Okay, so what number were you, Ted?
5, 4. 5 things.
How about the 1 stand up?
Now I know why the wives get so upset. You don't listen to me. You're not listening. Okay, so Ted gets to stay here. That's why I asked. The 4s will meet in here. Let's go down. The 3s will be outside. The 2s will be in the garage and the 1s in the fellowship. Okay, and we're gonna give you I'm gonna give you 15 or so minutes. Okay, oh, hold on, guys.
Paper or pen?
Yeah, you know what? I forgot to bring stuff. Does anybody have paper and pens? Timothy, could you get some paper? If you need pens, I can get you pens.
That's me.
Hold on. Hold on. I need each group to pick a spokesperson after you come back in, so you can summarize what you guys came up with, okay? Okay, thank you. Michael Kelly.
Yes.
Can you turn that on? Or, or, never mind. Does it take time to turn it back on? It doesn't matter, they can just wait, if anyone's just watching, they can just wait 15 minutes.
Hola.
Okay, Susan, here are the 4s.
Yes. So, 5 truths about a man's characteristics, 5 false things about his characteristics.
5 characteristics of true manhood and 5 characteristics of fake manhood.
Philotimo.
Your group is going to have to agree with you.
So,
They should know what it is then.
I didn't hear what you said.
St. Paisios talks a lot about Philotimo in his book.
What is Philotimo?
It doesn't really have a meaning, but it's everything that is good and righteous and pure and kind of manly. It's what the Greeks had when the Germans attacked them in World War II. It's what they had in the war against Turkey. bravery, heroism.
I'm not reading Philotimo like that, the way he talks about it.
Okay. I was interested in the term, and so I watched on YouTube, and it's kind of everything good and manly, sort of what I got out of it.
I've never heard manliness involved in it, but that's fine. I mean, but instead of saying Philotimo, it's probably better to say what the characteristics are. I understood Philotimo to be like, yeah, it's hard. I can't even think of it. I'd have to look it up. But it's kind of like always wanting to do, always having this openness to God and what's good. And it includes hospitality or others.
The actual definition is love of honor.
Okay, anyway,
Well,
I'm not here.
Oh, you'd like to stay? Okay, you're not staying.
No, this is your discussion group.
Okay, somebody put false up there and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2.
Well, yeah, but the
This is for
whiteboard's
the
not
whole group.
really free.
Oh, it isn't for us, okay.
Yeah.
I guess you can use it.
Okay, that's okay, I can write it down here.
Sure.
I can write it down here. I got a piece of paper.
This is for when we come back.
How long do we have?
15 minutes.
So we should start talking.
Yes.
Yeah, we should start talking.
So do we want to tackle, I guess we could point out if someone says something that we disagree with that might be, that we think is true, that might be false. Like if I would say like a quality was being strong, maybe that's not necessarily
Yeah, it's great.
a trait that is true. Maybe that trait is too overwhelmingly focused on in our society. That we have
Well,
to
you know
be
what?
strong.
I didn't get to finish, but you're gonna name it, but you have to define it kind of too, how you mean it. So if you mean strong, if you say strong, you have to say, what does that mean?
Okay.
Physical strength.
Yeah, I was saying
These
like
are some
physical.
ideas. These are
Oh,
just
okay,
ideas.
yeah.
Oh, here's some suggestions. There we go.
Let's think about false manhood. Aggression,
Yeah, I think that's like a really big one.
that's a bad one
in society.
in society right now, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Men seem to be, women think men are aggressive. I don't buy it. I don't think that's the case. I think I would go under false as far as I'm concerned. An aggressive being and propensity to do harm or violence to somebody.
Yeah, and I feel like a real man could like hold that like in more, like not like go out and fight people.
Right. And of course, as a Christian Orthodox, we don't want that either. So. As for qualities in manhood, that's a tough one.
Well, for example, I would suggest that one of the true characteristics of manhood, I guess, would be an awareness of his dependence on God.
God-fearing is one here, right here.
God, fearing it says?
It's on the list here. I'd agree with that, but
What does the critical mean? It's a contradiction to that, you mean? That's what it says under the top examples? The critical, you see to the right?
yeah.
And under God-fearing, it's a pushover?
I don't think it's.
That's not related, that's a contrarian view. Yeah? It's like people would say, oh, he's a believer and he believes in God and he's a pushover because of that, maybe. Or something like that. That's not how we're taking it.
It sounds like we put God-fearing down as one of our 5.
Yep, for
Yeah,
positive.
I would do that.
We got one. I'd say aggressive or violent. I mean, I don't know that anybody would say that being a man means you're violent, but
No, I would say that'd be a false one. I put that under one there.
so I think aggression is correct for being false.
Right.
We only have to come up with 4 false apparently, so. I always, to me, humility is something that I've always really identified with as being part of it, but there's a tendency for that when people are, when you say humility, they interpret that as that you're a pushover, but that's not the same thing.
Right.
I really think humility is a strength because as
In an Orthodox context, it is.
there's a lot of things that if you're able to take not criticism or insults or what have you without responding in an aggressive way, that's a sign of humility. Not always having to be first as a sign of humility. Not demanding respect, but earning it by your actions towards others. That's humility. So.
The problem is we're trying to make these decisions kind of we have to decide the context in which decisions are made, because if you take current affairs online or whatever, in the media, it's a horrifying lack of any of these. It's just men do horrible things. This is what the media pushes us at right now. So it's not only from the Me Too's, it's the media and the news. It's always a guy that's like being violent or attacking somebody on the street. These senseless attacks. So I guess we have to make it in the context of what in Orthodoxy that means, I guess. So maybe that will help us narrow it down.
So we have God-fearing. Are we
Yep.
agreeing on humility or humbleness?
Yeah, I would.
I like the concept too. Father sort of introduced this, is that there are no warriors, but being a protector. Defending your family, defending.
Protector is a good one.
Yeah, I think.
It's kind of built into us, right?
Yeah.
Hardwired.
Kind of, part of that would be, not putting a negative or positive connotation out, just part of being a man is to be aware of others.
Yeah. So let's look at that. It's like there's an adjective here that we could use for that. Awareness of others. Would that be respectful or
Exemplary?
Or virtuous.
Virtue.
virtuous might be the ethics of Christ.
Virtue.
I do like self-controlled as well. Because that's, unfortunately, is what you were saying. You're Ted, right?
Yes.
I'm Chuck.
And your name was what?
Chuck.
Chuck. Thank you.
I think that what you touched on earlier with the popular media, or what you see that men are the ones that are the aggressors, and what is popular media as John Wick. You know, if you kill his dog, he'll proceed to kill thousands of people in the most bloodthirsty way you can possibly do. And so that's like a vengeful, that's how, men are perceived, as these violent, aggressive people.
Oh,
And
so
that's-
vengeful would be good, be a false manhood.
Right.
Vengeful, yes.
But that I just think of self-control, that if someone has wronged you or what have you, that you don't respond immediately, that there's a level of control or discipline, perhaps.
So what do we have so far, Ted, on virtue, on the positive?
God-fearing, humility, protector. And
Maybe something,
aggressive and vengeful would be false.
maybe something virtue could be like thoughtful.
Like what?
Thoughtful.
Yeah. Thoughtful. Hopefully. Leader? Is leader one that makes sense or not?
I don't know, I think if you have all these qualities, you're almost automatically a leader.
Yeah.
That those are qualities that describe a leader for your family, but
How about discipline?
I like discipline.
Discipline, respectful, but also discipline in terms of being organized and approaching life in an appropriate way. A
Saying no to
positive
temptation.
learning attitude.
You know, walking a certain way.
Discipline.
I like that.
Yeah, we have a try to be organized and just to compare it. Say sometimes
How about a servant? Is that it? Are we out of spaces?
no, we
for
got one
positive?
more. What'd you
Servants?
say?
Servants? Like being a servant, serving others? When I look at who's the ultimate man that we should try to emulate, it be Jesus. And
Oh,
that was definitely a
There
part
you
of
go.
his demeanor, was when he was washing the disciples' feet. I think he stepped in. He had this quality where he was a servant at times.
so service, kindness would be another approach.
I like kindness too.
Kind, virtuous. Humble's good for that too with Christ. And so God-fearing would be, it's not really an adjective for a quality of a person. It's more like his belief. But it kind of like the go to Christ, because that's really the greatest example of.
I mean, obviously, it's something we'll never achieve. We should always strive for it. But I think if you look at some of the examples, you also look at being in the temple with the money changers. There was a level of firmness there. I don't know that he was. I can't remember the specific scriptures, but I don't know that he had hate. Definitely had some level of righteous anger there, but for he saw what was happening in the temple. But I think God-fearing for me is important to be part of a manly
Sure.
characteristic.
Well, here it is.
But it's not just about me.
I agree, I think that should be the top one.
Yeah.
I think that's our first.
How about action oriented? Does that make this guys tend to be go get 'em type of people? Make things happen.
St. Pancratius wasn't particularly action oriented.
He wasn't.
More prayer oriented.
Yes. Neither was
I
Christ.
guess that's action. But
Christ was a real word action oriented, but he had actions. He took actions. He had definite things.
So we have God-fearing and humble. And did we pick?
Protector,
Protector.
discipline.
We've got 4.
Need one more.
I think we're called to be virtuous.
Virtues.
But we'd have to really articulate.
Yeah, because
What virtuous means.
that's almost every other word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because virtuous, there's bad virtues too. Like, aren't
Yes.
there?
I think this implies good virtues.
The good virtues, like honest and trustworthy and self-control and
Yeah, just start reading
discipline
the
and
list.
loving.
Maybe that's the magic answer.
Yeah.
Because
And virtuous is.
it encapsulates everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I would say like being able to like tell the truth, even though with like kind of like with children, it might hurt them for like you telling them not to do certain things, and even though they might hate you for that, you can still do it for them.
He has boundary setter here. Of course, that's really critical in today's world. Fathers are the boundary setters, and women don't generally do that. So, especially when people divorce and stuff, kids tend to go with the women legally, but also they like, oh, I don't know about dad, he set the boundaries, things like that. So think about, I mean, I don't know if it's a virtue. It almost seems like it's a not to some people.
I think we probably have about 5 minutes left. Maybe we should get to
Okay.
the bad side.
How about the bad side? Yeah.
If that.
If that.
Okay.
I think ignorant hedonist is good.
Hedonistic.
Ignorant hedonist.
How do you spell hedon?
H-E-D-O-N-I-S-T.
Yeah, hedonistic is really a good one.
You know, to me, I just think of when I wasn't raised in a Christian home, my dad used to think Hugh Hefner was the man.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Oh, yes.
I'm like, no, I couldn't think of anything further from the truth. But he was the epitome of a hedonist.
What does Trump get yelled at all the time about? The fact that he down talks people, or he calls them names and stuff, or
He's mean-spirited. That's what they say.
sorry?
Mean-spirited.
Yes,
I bet that's what we could say that. Mean-spirited.
that's a good one. That's a good one.
I would include self-centered in that.
Self-centered.
Yeah. Negative list is one of the 5.
Yeah, self-centered. That's a good one.
Is that 4?
That's 4.
All right, we're good.
We need one more.
We need 5 of each, though.
Oh, I thought it was 4.
Yeah, that's 5. We're on team 5.
Oh, okay. I just
You
thought
need
Father
about,
had only 4 numbered up there under false, so I thought we only had 4.
you need a
Now we've got
biologist
5.
to- you need a
Okay.
biologist to define a woman and a mathematician to define a man.
Okay. How about, you know what, I think that's, how about, we wrote vengeful, right?
Yes, we did.
Angry?
Angry. Yeah, I would say.
But I mean, to me, no one would ever say, wow, you're a good man if you're angry. No one would really
No, it'd
say.
be more like false, right?
I'm just thinking of what qualities the world would say
Yeah.
are good attributes for a man, but we would disagree with. I would say things like intimidator. You know, you think of those people that are in business, like, hey, look, he's intimidating. He walks in the room and he intimidates others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something like that the world would call a positive attribute, or something that could be considered positive, but we wouldn't.
What would you say, like Putin or Hitler? What would be the attributes of them that come across as
A
male?
tyrant.
Tyrants.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Tyrant. Yeah. Would you guys agree, tyrant? Because certainly that's not what we want to be known for.
No, I
But
mean,
people think of people like Trump and Putin and Hitler's tyrant.
I mean, I think too that, you know, you look at
What's-
traditional, what people thought it was a traditional family is the father, the dad was sort of a tyrant, you know.
Well, the boundary center, yeah. How do you define that? Define tyrant? What would you define that as?
To me, a tyrant would be those that do not have, they only have themselves and their wishes in the best interest, and don't care for those that they are supposed to be caring for.
Self-interest, priority.
It's self-centered on steroids then.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure it is. We wanted you to win.
How do you know?
Good word. The group in the garages, they're coming. They were indecisive any different? Now,
Those are the qualities we don't like, right?
They got false religion.
it will be here. Oops. Oh. There's no right answers. On the back of here, I wrote down kind of my list. But it's impossible to get it perfect, right? Yeah. Except for group, for whatever Corey's group is in.
Yeah, because we don't want to throw out any of these true examples. There's not a single one you say, oh, we can just discard this.
Yeah.
They're all good. Virtuous includes them all. Yes, there we go.
Okay, we're all back. Okay, so let's, as would be appropriate, let's start with group number one. They're number one. Group number one. Are you the spokesperson?
Yes.
Can you speak?
Did you get bullied into that?
He's the youngest and smallest, but probably the most virtuous.
Yes.
Yeah, the most eloquent.
What did group number one say?
Do I start with the 5 truths?
Yeah.
Okay. They said self-control,
Okay.
serving,
Okay.
contentment,
Content.
yeah,
Nice.
provider,
Okay.
and problem solver.
Ooh. Okay. Very impressive. Group one. Let's go through all of them and then we can discuss why you chose certain ones. We're already gonna go late, I can tell, so let's enjoy it. Number two, group two.
Devotion to God.
Okay.
Honorable. Humble. Protector. And responsible.
Okay.
And just, we divided protector and provider were different
Oh,
in our mind.
okay. Okay, and group number three.
Tell them you're on.
Please chime in, gents, if I'm running away with this. I think that one of the bedrock descriptors we talked about authenticity was God-fearing. And from there, I think it's the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Humility.
Did you say wise then? Or no? Did you say? Number two was?
Number two, we'll go with what? Humility.
Okay.
Honorable.
Okay.
Trustworthy.
Okay.
Repenting.
That's 5. And, oh yeah, we didn't do false yet, did we? Okay. Group number 4.
I'll read that. Number 1 is God-fearing.
Okay.
Yeah, a number of those. Right there, 3 of those. Number 2 would be humility.
Okay.
Number 3 would be protector.
Okay.
Number 4 is discipline. Number 5 is virtuous.
Okay, so we had doubles on God-fearing and humility and provider.
Triples on humility,
Triple?
humble and humility.
Ah, okay, that's good. It's the mother of all virtues. Okay, just in general, why don't we just, you can just tell us why you chose particular ones, if you feel kind of strongly about it, or why would you pick any of these? Why would these be more important than something else?
Well, I thought that the devotion of God was the kind of foundation of bedrock, and it's also part of being an example. And then if you're going to be an example, then what's the better example? Christ and all of the saints and everyone, all the prophets of the Old Testament as well, kind of leading up there. So that was really, really important to us.
So if you devoted to God, would you be virtuous?
Yes.
Would you be repentant?
Yes.
Trustworthy?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. There's no right answers, except that there are. No. Anybody else?
We just kind of talked about how like it's always been like this for men too, like since even the apostolic fathers, what all these things got, humility, God fearing, trustworthiness, repenting. Like, it's always been this. This isn't something that's just was made up at a certain time. It's always been this way, and I think that's how our group kind of came up with it. Just we talked a lot about past and all that stuff, and then how it mixes with the future or the present, I should say, and that's how we came up with ours.
Anybody else? Why you picked these particular characteristics? Why would these be important to you? I mean, why would these be important for you today to manifest?
I think they're aspirational. These are goals, and they're difficult. They're not easy. The false ones, when we get into those are easy. It's sin, in a lot of ways. But those, so one of the things we sort of discussed a little bit was that the modern society, the popular media, seem to hold up these negative attributes. Men are, like John Wick, if you kill a dog, you'll kill 1,000 people in grisly ways. That's considered being a real man, Those are the kind of things that are, but that's all sinful, easy behaviors to fall into.
Yeah, good point. It's we maybe haven't reached any of these things completely, but we can enter more deeply into them, and we can be really failing miserably for some of them sometimes.
So when we were talking, I was thinking about the protector element and how the first formed man didn't perform that function in the garden, and kind of leads up to where we're at, right? And that it's interesting as you watch that and then compare it to what we think of protecting, and then see how some of the saints left their families in the hands of God, but protected their families by being true to the faith and true
truly faithful to the faith, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I mean, so.
Are you thinking about leaving?
Not at all. I'm thinking about more during the persecutions where, you would have mothers encouraging children, which I think was a very manly thing to stand up during the persecution.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, there would be men encouraging their loved ones to not give in. And that led to martyrdom. And so I think our general idea of protection is that we're going to stand in the way and by golly, I'll take you out if you come after one of mine. But that's not necessarily what the saints did. They protected their families and their loved ones by their faithfulness.
They protected them from evil. They protected them from losing their salvation. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Okay. When we come up with false qualities, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 through 5.
Portrayed as dumb in TV.
Excuse me?
Men are portrayed as dumb in TV.
Dumb?
Homer.
Oh.
Homer says.
Ignorant.
What'd you say?
Number
Number 2.
No.
2.
Wait, no.
The ones we have are arrogant.
Oop, stop.
Well, I was doing it differently.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going all.
We're just going 1, 2, 3, 4
Oh, okay.
on each number.
Okay.
3. Quickly.
Toxic.
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 4.
Aggressive.
Aggressive. Okay, back to 1. Trans.
What is it?
Trans.
Like transgender?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the falseness of man could be a woman and woman could be a man.
That's,
Yeah.
2.
domineering.
3.
Reliable.
Unreliable. 4.
Vengeful.
Revenge.
Like John Wick. Whoever came up with that one.
Number 3. Number 1. This is confusing. Number 1. Non-nurturing. 2.
Lustful.
3.
Self-centered.
4.
Hedonistic.
He done what?
He done it.
Number 4. 1. Incapable. Okay. 2.
Lazy.
Yeah. Lazy. Stupid. Man, you guys really went for it.
Self-centered.
You already had that. Number 3.
He doesn't sound about it.
Oh, sorry, that was the other group.
They were hedonistic, not self-centered.
That was it. Okay, number 5. 1.
Self-reliant.
Self-reliant. Oh, interesting. Okay. 2.
Indifferent.
3.
Pleasure seeker.
Pleasure. 4.
Tyrannical.
Tyrannical. Tyrannosaurus.
Tyrant.
Okay. Any comments? Why are these so bad?
A lot of them are
It's
sins.
done so bad. Huh?
A lot of them are like sinful.
Sinful.
So
They also just cut another person down in order, so it's not like women are becoming better than men on virtue. They had to cut the men down in order to feel superior over them. I mean, like all those dumb. I mean,
A lot of them feed the ego.
Who?
A lot of
Oh, a lot of these
a lot,
things.
yeah, they feed the ego.
Feed the ego.
A lot of them, all of them. Pretty much
Yes.
all of them, except for really the dumb one. I don't know how that feeds the passions.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't know what to do, but all of them feed the passions and give in to the pleasures.
What's wrong with lazy?
Laziness, it's slothful.
Yeah.
it's pleasure.
I think
Sin.
It's fun.
when I'm looking at these two different lists, the false ones are very inward focused. They're all self-indulgent. They are about serving the self and the individual, where the true ones are more outward facing. They're not so much focused on yourself, but on others and how you can serve or how you comport yourself around others. These are like, well, I mean, they're sins, they're sinful behaviors, but generally are affecting you first, or the individual first.
Well, that certainly makes sense when it comes to how we understand Christian life.
It would seem also to me that it's on the false side of it, what is popular media projecting that this is what maleness stands for. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
There is one thing I noticed what was interesting, and it kind of follows on what Subdeacon said, is that if we say these are very inward, and then the true are very outward, in like a serving capacity, but by the definition on protectors, but particularly, what's really interesting is that there might be a contradiction, because if what Subdeacon says is correct, that serving your faith is in a way of being a protector, protecting your salvation. But then also on this list, we have indifference. So the question that I always struggle with is, I think he makes a very valid point about your own salvation. But then if I see evil happening in front of me and I do nothing, does that not affect my salvation as well, of being indifferent? And there is a lot of mentioning about being lukewarm in the Bible and not doing nothing. I don't know. That's something that troubles me as a role. And it's very interesting that he says that, and I think about that. And that's also why we, in a group, we separated provider and protector. We're actually completely two separate things. Because when we had a discussion on protector, it was about when something evil's happening, whose responsibility is to do something and in what role. And if it's not a God-fearing man that has this kind of moral code, then who else is it, or does nobody have that responsibility? So that was something that...
So not doing something could come from fear, cowardice, or it could come from discernment. I think we'll get into that in my second talk. I think, yeah, you're right, because not doing anything could be coming from sin.
And doing something can be coming from sin.
Exactly.
Well, I think one of our positives that we had discussed in our group was courageous was an authentic characteristic, and the definition that was given to being courageous was doing the right thing for the right reason, regardless of the consequences, which sounds a lot in a similar vein of what you're talking about over there.
Well, one of the things, just a conversation I had with Father, and we talked about this, and I call him every 3 months, and we have this conversation. It's been a long theme, but what matters is obviously what's in your heart when you do the action. That's the thing. You're right. Where am I coming from? And I think God will judge based on that. So if I'm coming from a sinful place, then yeah, I'm totally putting my own salvation in jeopardy from doing it. If I'm coming from pure heart and doing it, well, then God's going to know that as well. But that's the trouble. How do you keep yourself in that mindset that if you did have to do something, you were coming from a pure heart? That's a really tall order.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it comes from the ability to have honor in yourself as well. Because like you were saying, it all depends on the heart and what you do. If you're indifferent because you're lazy, then that's sinful. But if you do something out of pride, then that's sinful as well. So it depends on how you view your action or inaction and why you're doing it.
I think it might be useful to view this from the perspective of the threefold office of prophet, priest, and king, which there's only really two people that have that role, and it was Adam and Christ. And that's why what we were talking about, the true parts are more outward facing, because God, by his nature, is outward facing and facing, in relation to us, he's always facing outwards towards his creation. And that part of the reason why we have priests or prophets or kings is because they are instantiating God's actions in the world. They're bringing them forth in a unique way, similar to how the Theotokos is also very unique in her relationship to our salvation. It's to a certain extent, a lesser extent, obviously, everyone is unique in their relationship to God's ministry to the created world, you know.
So I think when I mentioned that, what I had in mind was something more to do with discernment and the idea that we can put on a facade of manliness that fits some sort of picture we have in our head. But I think that the true man is responsive to God and the leading of the Holy Spirit and discerns when that time is to do each action. So, yeah.
Okay, well, it's a good discussion. Scott Irie says he is watching us.
Hey, Scott.
And
Hey, Scott. Hey, Scott.
Wishes he could be here. Just for kicks, here's the ones I picked without, a long time of thinking or anything. For the truthful, I had courageous, because I think you can't. I should mention, when we're talking about these things, like what's wrong with lazy? I'm chill, lay back. Well, what's wrong with it is that you can't be a spiritual fighter. You can't like swim upstream. If you're lazy, you're gonna end up in all kinds of other sinful behaviors, and you're not gonna be able to seek righteousness. You're not gonna be able to overcome adversity. You're not gonna be able to overcome temptation and so forth. So we have to view these things in light of how they move us toward a more spiritual way of living and thinking and acting, or they take us away from that. But I felt like her courage is huge for that reason. I put self-control as number 2, principled. I wanted to put also responsible for number 3. Meek. Meekness is not getting angry. Actually, meekness is slow to anger. Meekness is strength that doesn't go out of control. And I put forgiving. But there's so many that we could have done. For the false, I put abusive, indifferent, passive. Again, passivity, you're not going to be able to be the protector either physically or spiritually. Untrustworthy. If you're not trustworthy, what do you have? And lazy. But I don't know. Those are just the ones that I kind of picked out. So, what in the world is this? That is a human being. That is you and me, without legs. So, I'm gonna give a little information here. Some of this, some of you may have heard before, some of it could be completely new to you. And I think I'm gonna have to get rid of, make room for more here. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to give you kind of a mechanism or a paradigm in which you can, first of all, evaluate where your sin or my sin might be coming from. And to understand the way the church fathers understood our soul and where we get what kind of spiritual powers that we have. But ultimately, this is going to lead to, I'm going to focus on one particular power of the soul that I think maybe is getting back to what St. Paisios was saying about there are no warriors today. So let's just go through it a bit. So the fathers tell us that there are 3 powers of the soul. And the first one is properly called the noetic power. Sometimes it's called intelligence, but this is very easily misunderstood in our language because this primarily has to do with the brain. Okay,
but rational, as opposed to intelligence being rational, too rational.
Yeah, rational though. The word that we use for rational comes from the word logos, which is the same word we use for Jesus Christ. So in that sense, in its original sense, I would say rational is, but I mean, it does touch on intelligence. So this diagram is not anything official. So I'm going to represent this intellectual power or this noetic power like this. So we'll put noetic. Noetic comes from the word nous, and this is the nous. Many of you have heard me talk about the nous. You'll see it in the Philokalia and the Church Fathers, although Metropolitan Callistos of blessed memory, he calls it the intelligence, like when you're reading the Philokalia. And I think it's hard for us to receive that word. He could have just used the original word nous, but of course we don't have that word in English. In English, we don't even know we have a nous. But what is this noetic power? This is the power of knowing. Oops. I don't know how to spell it. The power of knowing, of pursuing knowledge and understanding. So, This is our ability to know God and to understand truth by direct apprehension, to apprehend truth. And we could talk a lot about this, but I'm going to keep this just kind of simple. Now, that's what it is in general, and specifically if it's healthy. If it's a healthy noetic power, it's coming from the nous, which is God has made to be in the heart so that we can see God and we can see spiritual things from a pure heart. Sometimes the nous is called the eye of the soul. That's why he drew it as an eye. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And St. Paul talks about the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know the hope of his calling and the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints. So he's kind of referring there to the noetic power. And if you go through your Bible, your New Testament, you can, for most verses, you might be able to categorize them in referring to one of these three powers. Okay? So the second, I could say also that the noetic power is related to prayer. Okay, the second power of the soul is called the appetitive, from the word appetite. Or it's also called the desiring, which is pretty obvious. So this power of the soul has to do with wanting or hungering, desiring. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. That verse is referring kind of to the appetitive power. And I'm having all of these come out of the nous, from the nous. This one's going to go in two different directions. So, desiring or appetitive. Okay, so if the nous is healthy and God-fearing and so forth, righteous, it's going to be its desire is going to be directed toward God, hungering and thirsting for righteousness. The third power of the soul is called the irascible, well, let's call it the insensitive first. Also irascible. If somebody is a real rascal, or if they're incensed, I'm just incensed. What does that mean?
Furious.
Yeah, furious. So, this is the ability to have a zeal or a forcefulness toward something. And in the healthy soul, it's a zeal or an energy or effort toward God, directed toward following God. It's kind of twofold. So it would be a zeal for righteousness, and it will be also manifested as the ability to repel evil, to say no to evil. So, because you have to have a forcefulness. I forgot to mention, for the appetitive, the healthy soul, of course, would desire God, would love God and neighbor who is made in the image of God. We already talked about that. Okay, so 3 powers of the soul. And I will put this one down here. The insensitive. Oops. The insensitive power. Okay. Now, it's interesting. Oh, hold on. Hold on. The appetitive power is related to fasting. So the noetic is related toward prayer, the desiring toward fasting, and the insensitive, anybody guess? Almsgiving. Good. So now we have the 3 pillars of the spiritual life: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And they correspond with the 3 powers of the soul. And now I can quote St. Hezekiah the priest from the Philippilia. Every sin and every wickedness is the work of these 3 powers. And every virtue and every deed of righteousness is the work of the same 3 powers. It's the key. It's the key. But I was going to say, it's kind of interesting. Who remembers the Wizard of Oz? Who's the character that needed a brain? The Scarecrow. He needed a brain, which kind of corresponds to the noetic power. He needed understanding. And then somebody needed a heart. Tin Man needed a heart, which is the desiring. And then the lion needed courage, which relates to the insensitive. So, see what Hollywood did way back when? Good things back then. Also, the Brothers Karamazov. Anybody read that? By Dostoevsky?
Yes. The 3 main characters, and this was purposeful. We know that this was purposeful. We don't know about Hollywood. Dmitri related to the intelligent, but in the fallen sense, he was all about the reasoning, and he was a atheist. Ivan was the one who committed the murder. He was out of control with his anger.
Aren't those switched?
Yeah, I think Dmitri was accused of the murder.
I think Ivan is the noetic, and Dmitri is probably.
Ivan was
Are you sure?
Ivan was the politician.
I know Alyosha is the 3rd one.
Alyosha is the monk or the pseudo.
Okay, you could be right. I thought I looked this up, but okay.
It's possible I don't remember everyone.
But so those are the 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then Aloysia is the desiring, except his desire is generally healthy. So this is part of reality. Like, you see it everywhere. St. Maximus talks about the three powers. They're supposed to work for righteousness, for godliness. And this is how he says it. He says there's three powers of the soul. The noetic, the excitable, he calls it. The excitable is the insensitive, and the desiring. By the noetic power, we seek to understand what is good. By the desiring power, we desire the good we have understood. And by the excitable power, we strive and fight for it. See how these work together. The noetic power seeks to understand. The desiring seeks to desire the good we've understood. And the insensitive, by the insensitive power, we strive for it, and we sometimes fight for it. Okay, but through sin and our fallen condition, these powers have become distorted or diseased within us, which means that they get misdirected and misused. Now, when we misuse one of our spiritual powers, it is called, we generally call it or label it as a passion. It's a passion, one of the passions. St. Cyril of Alexandria, way back in the 2nd, 3rd century, said, passion is an excessive feeling or appetite going beyond what is reasonable. Interesting, he says the passion is a desire or appetite that goes beyond the rational or the noetic. And then he says, passions are a disturbance of the soul contrary to our nature in disobedience, through disobedience. Okay, so what happens to these powers when they're fallen? When the nous and the heart is darkened by sin, what happens to these powers that God created for us to use for seeking Him, for understanding Him, desiring Him, and seeking Him? What happens to the noetic power? You tell me. The power of knowing. The power of knowing and understanding truth.
You just accept lies or unnaturalness.
Ignorance.
Are you going to know God? Are you?
Like, reasoning becomes the center of everything.
Good.
And so you don't need God or anything.
Excellent. That's my son. Right there.
So it's primarily materialistic as well.
Yeah. So the reason, the fallen human reason takes over, and you end up being an atheist or something, or a hedonist. You don't really think about God. It's just, sorry, somebody else said something. Kurt, Tim?
No, I just said based kind of on the simple style about it, it basically puts you into being a materialist. I mean, if you're cut off from the noetic, what's left?
Yeah. When the noose is darkened and you can't see spiritual things, then the fathers say your noose becomes like the dog in a butcher shop. Just go after every desire. And when you don't get it, what happens?
Angry.
Yeah.
You're really angry.
Yeah.
See how they work together or don't work together.
It seems like with all of this stuff, it all becomes almost reversed from its original intention. Like with fasting, you become gluttonous. With almsgiving, you become a sense. Not with the noetic prayer and the noetic parts of it. The opposite of that is materialism and reason, fallen reason. And the desiring just incenses everything.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is the opposite. It becomes the opposite.
Maybe
what happens to, yeah.
Another way for the prayer maybe become pragmatic.
Well, pragmatic doesn't have to be bad, right? But yeah, I mean, just like as if.
Yeah, exactly. Like
What
you
do you
just, you start reasoning, using your reason as the only guiding principle, and then it goes to a form of utilitarian pragmatism.
That's basically, that's a good way to look at it.
So people say whatever works.
Yeah. Or the greatest good, or to go along to get along, because it makes the most comments.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah. So it just waters everything down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. What happens to the appetitive desire when it's not when it's fallen and diseased?
It never gets fulfilled.
It never gets fulfilled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but
It's
it
always
tries pretty
more.
hard.
Yeah.
Insatiable.
Insatiable, that's the word I was looking for.
Insatiable.
Uncontent.
That's a good one.
Insatiable,
Yeah.
discontent.
Yeah.
But instead of loving God, it's love of self. Becomes love of self, and usually the pursuit of one's passions.
Isn't it interesting? It kind of just
It
think
becomes
about that.
it almost becomes a guiding principle in itself.
Yeah, isn't that kind of interesting to think about that? I mean, when the Lord we talk about what Satan was, he's a roaring lion, running about, looking to devour. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it just fits.
Yeah.
And what happens to the insensitive power, the drive, the forcefulness?
Indifference.
Anger.
Avariciousness.
Yeah, it could be indifference. Like if it's weak, it could become indifferent. But usually it becomes angry.
Becomes something much more active, angry, right?
That's probably where the atheism comes in at it.
Angry. Well,
It's
it becomes
self-serving in it.
angry toward others usually. Like,
And the
let go of my ego.
And the difference
Yeah.
falls into nihilism.
Anybody wants to take your stuff.
That's the end game. Nothing matters.
Okay, good. So let's just focus in on the insensitive a little bit more. And I should probably try to end.
3:30.
Is it 3:30?
3:27.
Okay, that's when I'm supposed to. Is that when I'm supposed to quit, or was it 3? Oh well. Okay, so manhood relates to all three of these, but just focusing for a second on the insensitive power. So like I said, if we're using it properly, well, let me say, it's essential for exercising our manhood properly, because how else can we seek the kingdom of God if we don't have any drive to do so? I mean, something has to propel you in life. Otherwise, you become indifferent, lazy, all those things that we talked about. If you have to seek the kingdom of God first and his righteousness, then, I mean, the Bible talks about seeking, knocking, asking. Those are all actions of kind of force, you could say. By the way, women need this too. And in the lives of the saints and the hymnography of the church, we often talk about a particular woman saint, and we talk about how she showed manliness, or manly bravery, in fighting against evil or the devil. But specifically, Jesus, our Lord, in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, 12, he talks about from the time of St. John the Baptist till now, the kingdom of heaven suffers, what's he say? Violence. And the violent take it by force. So this is what he's getting at. This is what the church fathers say he's getting at. Like, it's a forceful activity to try to enter into the kingdom of heaven. This is why you have all the asceticism, that is, and the discipline and so forth, that's part of Orthodox church life that seems like ridiculous, maybe, to our society. Why would you do that crazy stuff? But you would do anything to find the perfect girl that you would want to kind of take your pleasure out on. Probably go half around the world or all over the world, right? That takes effort. St. Gregory, well, let me back up. If we're going to fight against our passions and therefore repent and fight against temptation, we will need this spiritual violence or energy. Without a strong and healthy anger, quote unquote anger, toward evil, we're left as victims to the whims of the demons and our own passions. So St. Gregory of Nyssa talks about an anger, a pure anger that was created by God for us to have. Sometimes this is called righteous indignation. St. John the Baptist had this, right? But Father Alcoa used to say, there is such a thing as righteous indignation, but you don't have it. Because that's the way we should consider it. Yeah, it exists, but I don't have it. Because when I'm feeling indignant, it's probably sinful, and I need to really kind of pull that back, right?
Isn't there a few stories about St. John Maximovich where he showed righteous indignation?
Yeah, he did. He went to a party on Halloween, a costume party, where a bunch of his parishioners were. And there was it seemed like there was like a balcony at this place. He just stood there looking, and little by little, everybody started noticing and became quiet until the whole room became quiet. And then he left. It was a feast day. I mean, it was a feast day, and he just came back from liturgy. So, yeah. He got away with it because of his purity. So I could draw this out, but I think you get the picture. Like, we have to have kind of an intolerance for sin, but I want to say that it's a great idea for people today, and let's say maybe particularly in the teaching of, or the way it's lived out in other Christian groups sometimes. Yeah, be really intolerant when it comes to other people's sin. That's sort of celebrated, if you will. But in Orthodoxy, it's primarily intolerance for one's own sin. And specifically, we're supposed to use anger only for being angry with our own sin. And with the devil, you could say, in that context.
Would that be why almsgiving is the cure for that, because it's self-denying?
Yeah, so almsgiving is the way we cure that, because kindness, generosity, giving, showing love, showing mercy, that's the healing medicine for anger toward those that you think are sinning against you, or just, not doing what you want and so forth, the things that make you angry.
So, Father, we're trying to develop a softer heart then.
Yeah.
Get rid of some of the hardness.
Definitely. Because, the scriptures say an angry man cannot please God.
Yeah.
So, a pure anger is a dispassionate anger. Who had that anger?
Jesus.
When Jesus was cleansing the temple.
Yep.
Right? And there's the story of St. Martinian. This will show you kind of how to use your incensive power. Remember, so this monk he allowed a woman to come into his cell because it was raining, and she was begging him. She turned out to be, her purpose was to seduce him. When she came in, and she, took off her cloak, and she's beautifully dressed, and she's gorgeous, and he didn't want to fall into the sin, so he stuck his hand in the fire, right? Which is probably where C.S. Lewis gets with the foot in the fire. So, he didn't say, "How dare you, you sinful wretch, depart from me, you are not worthy to be." No, he was dealing with himself and his passion. St. Paisios again says, "If I avoid upsetting myself to protect my fleshly comfort, then I am indifferent to holiness. Spiritual meekness is one thing, and softness and indifference are quite another. Some say, I am a Christian and therefore I have to be happy and calm. But they are not Christian. They are simply indifferent, and their joy is only a worldly one." I have other stuff, but I think it's better to leave people wanting more. It's 3:37. We have Vespers at 5, and we have one more reflection that won't be long.
What was that last thing on Paisios? Where was that written?
Where's it written?
Yeah.
I'll have to send it to you.
Okay. I'll refer.
But I was going to give as examples, especially St. Moses the Ethiopian and St. Cyril the Athenian, how they changed their incensive power, how they redirected their incensive power. Because St. Moses was a murderer and robber, and St. Cyril punched a man so hard in the chest he almost died. And they were both huge, strong men.
Saint Simeon and who?
Silouan, the Athenate.
Are you talking about we're gonna have a break or something?
Yeah, let's have a break.
The food's not really ready till 4.
Huh?
The food will be ready, won't be ready till 4:15.
Yeah, well, this is a different kind of break. There's some trail mix in there and some cookies. Just take a break.
And there's still coffee too.
Yeah, let's come back. Let's come back in 10 to 4.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Is that 10?
12 minutes.
I get it.
You get it? Yeah, okay. All right.
It'll be like that.
Thank you guys, go, go, go.
Yep. Good job, gentlemen.
How are you? You getting tired?
Hotel. Oh, good.
can't do anything around the house. That's what's killing me right now. It's my time to do things around the house.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Dave eats pretty good meat.
I'm lifting myself right now. That doesn't seem like what a real man would say.
Ready?
It's
Those transitional
yeah. Correct. Yeah, they warned me that it would take like a couple of minutes to do that.
Ready to tell Scott where everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of.
2 minutes, let's see that. Except for
Is Scott still on
they
that?
still have second lunch.
Want me to wipe off the board, please?
I used to like, mine are really sensitive.
Because I don't think I'm right.
We just start moving on.
I've made a deal with myself.
See that? Can't control his desiring.
I was telling that earlier, they wanted another brownie. Come on.
Another.
Would you need it for him?
Yeah.
Need it for him?
Men.
Men, hear me, men. All who are men, hear me. I'll probably sit this time, but it doesn't have to be long. For this one, we were supposed to have you go into small groups and talk about your patron saints, which we can do. But let's see how this goes. So really, this was Father Justin's talk. And I stole a little bit of his. and added my own thoughts, but just in relation to manhood, I think what we can say that there's no template in Orthodoxy. There's no like one way of being a man. There might be definitive ways of not being a man, but there's not like a system, a dogmatic system of, manhood. We have saints who were literally warriors. I couldn't remember, and I didn't have time to look it up, I couldn't remember the saint that led the Serbian troops against the Muslims and was slaughtered.
Saint Lazar?
Lazar, okay.
Yeah. Extremely specific. Very good job.
Mr. Prologue.
Yeah. Check my footnotes.
Admire him a little bit,
Saint Lazar, he led the troops. They caught him, and it wasn't pretty afterwards. But anyway, he was a very holy man. We have saints that were literally warriors and fought in wars for specific reasons, I might add. And we have saints who chose to be pacifists for specific reasons. For instance, Saints Boris and Gleb, whose brother, they were all sons of Saint Vladimir, whose brother was waging war for the crown, for their father's crown. And if they would have fought, I'm trying to remember, the basic reason was if they would have fought, it would have divided the kingdom and caused all kinds of bloodshed and so forth. So they just allowed themselves to be killed. They're called passion bearers instead of martyrs. We have Saint Seraphim of Seraph, who, when these bully thieves came to take his valuables, they thought he was hiding something, and he didn't have any valuables. When they came, and he knew that they were going to beat him, he just said, do what you have to do. And they beat him, and so he was permanently hunched over after that. So you have that, and then you have Saint Nestor, who was a disciple of Saint Demetrius, who took a blessing from Saint Demetrius to go fight in the arena the giant who was killing all kinds of Christians. And he received a blessing from Saint Demetrius to go and kill the giant. Kind of like, David and Goliath. So you've got both sides, kind of. You've got St. George, the trophy bearer, the one who slays the dragon. And then you have St. Maximilian of Tebessa, who was martyred for refusing to fight in the military of a pagan army in pre-Christian Rome. So what gives? It's also, I was thinking about, there are two monk saints of the Russian church. I don't remember their names right now. Maybe Mr. Cohen will.
No, sir.
One of the monks was the head of believing that monks can own land and property. The other monk believed that monks should not own anything. And they're both saints in the Orthodox Church. There's a story that I always remember, and I looked it up again, that kind of shows this too. Abba Arsenios was a very austere and strict recluse, a monk who was a hermit, and he didn't see anyone. He wasn't social. In fact, his mother came and begged him to let her see him one more time, at least. And he refused. He said, Mom, would you rather see me now or in the kingdom of heaven? She said, okay. And she left, but then apparently, I think this is St. Moses the Ethiopian, which, by the way, if you didn't catch it, we are commemorating him tonight and tomorrow, his feast day. But there was a monk who had visited St. Arsenios. I guess apparently he did sometimes open the door for people, but he basically just sat there and stared at him. And the monk was not comfortable with him. So he left. And then he went to see St. Moses, and St. Moses received him very hospitably and joyfully and was very sociable. Another monk who knew about this prayed to God he wanted to know what gives, like, how can they both be saints? And he saw a vision, and he saw two boats, large boats, on a river. And he saw Abba Arsenios and the Spirit of God on the boat, and they were sailing as one in perfect peace. And then he saw St. Moses on his boat. St. Moses was with the angels, and they were eating sweet cakes. And so the idea was that they were both holy saints, and they were both living out that holiness in a different way that were salvific, that were saving them. They were eating honey cakes, to be exact. And then I was remembering, I didn't get to look it up, St. Paul, who said, if you eat, eat unto the Lord. If you don't eat, don't eat unto the Lord, right? So it's really, this is not meant to relativize things, right? But as long as it is all for God's glory, truly out of love for God, and not an abuse of any kind and so forth. There are different personalities, right? There's no one saint personality, quote unquote, saint personality. We all have to sanctify our unique and particular personality. And so that can be manifested in different ways. Different saints have different personalities. So we don't know, there's no rigid, or there's no test or litmus test for whether you should be a warrior or a pacifist saint on any particular day, in any particular situation, right? Or with any particular people. It depends. The only goal is holiness, which could be acquired in either way, depending on the situation. This isn't situational ethics, though. It's more mysterious than that. It depends on God's will and what is best for the salvation of ourselves and others. And it depends on the circumstances or the people you have to deal with. So St. Paisios sometimes would receive great sinners with a great deal of hospitality and love, but he also chased certain people away that he knew weren't going to listen to what he said. They weren't going to put into action what he said. There's a story on YouTube about how St. Paisios received this man who was living a homosexual lifestyle. And St. Paisios was able to convert him, basically, because he had a good heart. Like, you'd have to hear the story, but St. Paisios he leads him up to it. He says, okay, can you at least do this? And the man says, yeah, I can do that. And can you do this? I can do that. And basically just turns him into a Christian. So it depends, and talking about the Lord again himself, we know that he did different things. He railed against the Pharisees and Sadducees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. But also it was said of him that he would not bruise, he would not break a bruised reed. A little thin, bruised reed, he wouldn't hurt it at all. And he tells the people about, they tell him about the story of the tower that fell on people and killed them. And he said, same thing's going to happen to you if you don't repent. Well, that's not very nice. But then he says to the adulterous woman, I don't judge you. Just go and sin no more. So it's different situations, different needs. So it takes a lot of discernment.
Define discernment. Discernment. What does that mean?
Maybe you can discern what it means.
Yeah, just discern.
We have to discern it.
Yeah. Discernment means to be able to know what the right thing is to do in a particular situation.
Almost like a form of divine wisdom.
Yeah.
So it presupposes that you have that knowledge. That you have whatever it takes to do that, to discern. Presupposes that.
Yeah, it does, but I mean, discernment is a gift from God. It's a virtue. And so it could come to you in the moment from God, or it could be just a gift that somebody has. Solomon had wisdom, and he was able to provide solutions to people. But discernment means to be able to figure out what's really going on and to know what to do.
So that would be part of the noose that you mentioned in the wedding type of noose.
Yes.
And anyone can have this discernment? How do you know it's not your crazy brain and your passions? That's what I was curious about.
Well, I think it goes back to what he says. Are you glorifying God? Your actions are not glorifying Him. I think that's a good litmus test.
Discernment usually comes with purity and holiness.
Like you were talking about like lifetime decisions, though. Did you mention that?
I mentioned that.
I thought that's what you just said, something about making decisions.
Well, it does play into making decisions.
Okay, maybe.
It does. No, it does play into making decisions. It may be that the word decision and discernment, I don't know if they're related. But, okay, but most of us shouldn't imagine that we have discernment. That means, and therefore, we need counselors. That's why we go to someone else. Because it's very difficult for us to discern our own decision making because we have a vested interest and we have a motivation for perhaps choosing one thing.
We have a bias toward ourselves.
Say what?
We have a bias toward ourselves.
Yeah, that's why the fathers say that one who is his own spiritual father has chosen a fool.
Yeah.
That's why most people don't represent themselves in court, right?
You're a fool for counsel.
Fool for a client.
So,
it's interesting.
Some people were when we talked about having this men's retreat, later on I heard some voices talking about, that they wanted to hear about family life. How does the man act in family life? And I find that to be its own topic that's not that easy to talk about, by the way. There is a book, it's the fourth volume of a series called the Elder Paisios of Mount Athos Spiritual Counsels. And the fourth volume is on family life.
Coffee, I just finished that like a month or two ago.
Does it really say much about men now? I was looking through it, I haven't read it.
I mean, it's...
It seems like it says more about women.
But what they do is it does, but how it frames the discussion, if you take the inverse of what it's saying, then it defines what the man's role is by then how the instructions for the woman. So you can kind of rewrite, it's not direct, but you can kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard to find though.
Yeah, it's expensive.
But what I do want to say something about the difference between the Orthodox perspective and a lot of what you can find in Protestantism. Not everywhere, but I would say it's prevalent from what I've seen. When they think of man, the husband being the head, they tend to have a rather rigid, authoritarian type of mentality that is not Orthodox. Because in Orthodoxy, let's say you have a higher position of hierarchy, that means you have a greater responsibility of humility and love, right? And it's right in the Bible, chapter 5, Ephesians, on marriage. When St. Paul talks about it, see that the woman reverences or respects her husband, but the man has to die for his wife, as Christ died for the church. So it doesn't fit the whole thing with the way it's sometimes portrayed in the Protestant world, like the little submissive wife, just kind of, whatever you say, hon, whatever you say. I'm not saying that can't bring great sanctity to a woman. And I'm not saying that no Orthodox women live like that, but it's not the same thing. It doesn't turn out to be the same thing. I can't think of a better image than the big fat Greek Orthodox wedding, which isn't a great, it's not a great movie for learning your morals. But, when the man says, I am the head, the woman says, yes, but I am the neck. So the woman tells you, look over here, look, someone's suffering. Why don't you do something about it? Or look at your daughter, what she's going through, And women aren't wimps in Orthodox marriage. Now, they shouldn't be overly masculine in that sense of, the fact is the fathers talk about this, that Eve messed things up because she took the leadership role in the garden. She decided on her own to eat of the fruit, and then she recommended it to her husband. Whereas she should have said, at least, let me check with my husband, and hopefully he would have had the discernment or the self-discipline to say, okay, this doesn't look right, something's fishy. But it's reversed, it was reversed. the roles were reversed in the fall.
But Adam had his own sin after that. Well,
just
Adam, where are you?
No, he did.
He just hiding away.
Remembering on, don't some of the fathers say that had Adam refused to eat what she offered, there was still a chance for redemption, redeeming that moment?
I don't remember if any of the fathers actually say that. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I was trying to remember.
And I don't know if they actually say that, because I just kind of wonder how that would work.
Yeah, me too. That's why I was asking.
But, you know, I mean, since the woman came from man and they are one flesh, it's possible, I suppose, that the head could have redeemed the wife, and like death wouldn't have come, even if one of them repented, or even if the woman repented. But I mean, it's kind of weird, because it's like when we talk about sin brings death into the world, but what would have happened if only Eve sinned? You're not going to have women. Women die, men don't. Sorry, huh? Seems fair to me.
But then again, Adam's sin was after that. He hid. He knew
he also sinned by eating.
Yeah, but it was after
And
that. God
listening to his wife.
It was rejection of God. It was, where art thou? Adam, where art thou? And that's the same question God asks us. Where art thou?
Here's I guess this would relate to this. There's a wonderful little book called Man of God. Papa Demetrius Gagastapas. He died like in the 70s, but he has this amazing life. He was this holy priest in Greece, and this is basically his diary. And it's kind of like an Orthodox Rambo. That's the way I characterize it. It's full of adventure and miracles, and he was this very simple man, probably an elementary school education. And in his story, so he's dealing with the Nazis and the communists, mostly the communists. And they're always coming to him to take him away and kill him. And somehow he's saved. But his wife, so a lot of the priests compromised. And his wife is always constantly saying to him, why can't you be like the other priests? Just be normal. Just do what the other priests do. Just cooperate a little bit with it, you know. And he says in his journal, and I just acted as if I didn't hear her.
That's the man that opened not his mouth.
And, and eventually his wife came along because one of his daughters was becoming a nun, and his wife didn't like it at all. And he was just patient with her and so forth. And she eventually, you know, because it looks like she doesn't have very much of a spiritual nature to her, but through his patience, and like, instead of getting mad at her and you don't know what you're saying, he just didn't let it went in one ear, not the other. But she eventually came around, and she became very reverent toward the monastic life and the Christian life. And he was a married priest. He had 9 daughters. And he went to Mount Athos, and maybe his reputation preceded him, but the monks were saying about him, that is an example of Christian life. But it's just a little book, and it's
in the name of again
an adventure.
Man of God.
Man of God, yeah.
Papa Dimitri Gagastatis. It's just like it sounds. Gagastatis. It is pretty much like it sounds. G-A-G-A-T-H-I-A. S-T-A-T-H-I-S. But that reminds me of Adam and Eve, because the woman was off track, but because of the man's righteousness, she comes around and everything comes back to balance, proper balance. So what time is it? Do you want to talk about your
4:30.
patron saints, or do you want to eat chicken wings? One vote for chicken wings. 2 votes against. So far, 0.
Chicken wings.
Because of your indifference and you're not.
Chicken wings.
Here, raise your hand if you want
They're not
chicken
even-
wings.
I don't know who could be hungry.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you want to talk about your patron saint.
I do.
Oh,
I do.
chicken wings.
I studied it.
Destroyed.
How about 15 minutes? 15 minutes each.
Could it be after Vespers or?
For chicken wings, maybe we have an appetite by then.
Okay.
Maybe. Maybe.
The appetite power is going to be ready again.
Or need to eat now.
I don't know if there will be any left then.
You're gonna eat them all?
We can have compassion, Mary.
Oh, Mary.
Yeah.
There was another vote back there, but
It's okay.
don't look. Don't judge. He's, where are you hiding, Michael? Well, because we were going to break up into groups, and I don't know if you want to do that.
Still want the group.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it once.
How did your patron saint show man what it means to be a man? I can think of a story of Ambrose, St. Ambrose.
I could do that. I don't know. Should I just stay here
Stay right there.
Can I just ask for a favor, because I don't necessarily know everyone, if they could not say their name and then who their patron saint is, that would help me.
Yeah.
I'm Wyatt, and my patron saint is St. Ambrose of Milan. He was, he's known as the doctor of the church, one of the early Western church fathers. He baptized St. Augustine and brought him away from paganism. And when he was born, kind of as a start, his father said that bees came into his mouth as a child and left behind honey. So he was going to be a great orator, a great speaker. And for a long time, St. Ambrose was not baptized into the church, but he did have Christian. I know his mother was Christian. I think his father was too, but he just wasn't baptized because it was still kind of unusual to be Christian at the time. But he did later under circumstances that I'll get into later. But I think a lot of what St. Ambrose shows us of how to be a man is, just as Father Michael was talking about, as the reasoning behind and the glorification of God in all of your actions. So at the time...
Forgive me, but I perceive
Yes.
a strange presence.
It's very strange.
Who's
The
that?
light is gone.
It seems like a feminine presence.
No, it's been restored. Normality is returned.
Thank you.
Continue, Ambrose.
There's
Yeah,
disturbance.
We will have to quit pretty soon.
Yeah. But at the time there was an Arian heresy that was going around through the Roman Empire. And I think just his life of humility and submission to God, and also standing up for what was correct and what was right, as Constantine was talking about. Lauren, right? Yeah, okay. What he was talking about is if you see evil, what do you do with it? Do you not do anything about it? Is it sinful to be indifferent, or is it sinful to do something about it? Or what's the thing between the two? And I think he did a good deal of both, of passivity in keeping the peace, because before he was the governor of his city, and there was the death of the local bishop, and he tried to keep the peace as much as possible between Arians and Orthodox Christians. And because you would get, like, I don't know, mini gang fights between the two. They would try and take over each other's churches, and it'd get pretty rowdy. Go Orthodox, right? But they would get really violent, and St. Ambrose was just a governor. He wasn't even baptized yet. He was just a secular governor. He attended the election of the new bishop to replace the bishop that died. And he really did a really good job at keeping everything from getting violent and keeping people pacified and keeping himself pacified as well. So much so that the council that he was at to elect the new bishop ended up electing him the bishop when he wasn't even baptized yet. So he went through in about a week, going from being baptized to a deacon, to a priest, and then to a bishop, because the people thought that he would be the one to bring peace to the dispute between the Arians and the Orthodox. And that would be an example of, speaking your mind and keeping the peace, but not actively, like St. Nicholas of Myra, punching Arius in the face at the council.
What about the emperor?
And the Emperor Theodosius, I think it was. He
was that the first or the second?
I think it was the first. I can't remember. One of the two.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah, I'm bad with Roman emperor names.
That's why.
Yeah. There's always an Augustus, a Caesarius, or something like that. Whatever. But Emperor Theodosius, he killed a lot of people in just executions. And St. Ambrose was one of the only bishops that actually stood up to him.
It was Theodosius the first.
It was Theodosius the first. There we go.
Sounded like it. Yeah.
Sounded like it, yeah.
Second was a little better.
Yeah. He killed, I think it was like 7,000 people.
Maybe as a result of an uprising or something.
Yeah, as a result of an uprising.
Not just executing people.
Yeah, not just, yeah. There was an uprising. I can't remember the uprising's reasoning, but he killed a lot of people.
How about on January 6th? Just kidding.
Getting a little spicy. But he excommunicated the emperor, which was, whoa.
Yeah, he didn't let him come into the church.
Didn't let him come into the church
until he repented.
Yeah.
Did penance.
And he did repent. And he did repent.
There's a similar story about Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Saint who slapped a slab of meat down in front of Ivan and said, you pretend to fast, but by how you're killing these people, you may as well just have this meat and stop pretending. Something along those lines.
I think I remember that story. I don't remember the saint though.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
Wasn't it the bishop at the time?
I think it was. I think it was the bishop.
But that showed kind of the power that he thought that if God ordains earthly authority, then earthly authority has to do, as it's ordained to do, to keep the peace and to, wield the sword humbly. And yeah, he repented. He repented of all the people from the murder of the people that he killed, and then he was brought back into the church by Ambrose. He also did some lesser things, like antiphonal chant, which is kind of an early monastic Western chant. And I think that really shows the two different sides of manhood, kind of the two different sides that we were talking about, of more passivity and then taking a stand when you know that something has to be done. I think it's a really good example of both kinds, that you can do both in your own personal life and for others to do on one side or the other.
But I would say, in a righteous person, it wouldn't be passivity. It would be a active decision based in.
Yeah, I use the word passivity just kind of.
Yeah. I just clarify.
Yeah. But I think that's the biggest points that
standing up to the emperor.
Could I speak about my patron saint really quick?
Really quick.
Okay. Saint Mark also stood up to the emperor at the time. He was the only bishop who was sent to the Council of Ferrara, Florence, that didn't capitulate to the Latin pressure, and even the emperor at the council, he was looking so desperately for military support that he gave up the foundational beliefs of the church. And Saint Mark, not only did he refuse to compromise his beliefs, even when it cost him his position in Constantinople, he returned back to Ephesus, which was occupied by the Turks at the time, I believe. And he also shows this concept of fatherhood very well, because his direct the person that was his direct successor, Patriarch Saint Gennadios Scholarios, he was who Saint Mark picked him and told him to carry on the true dogmas of the church, and eventually that was what led to the union breaking apart between the East and the West after the Council of Florence. So he's an example for us modern day Christians when we're in a secular state that is so against what the church teaches. He's really an example of planting the seed for the next generation to grow and do an even greater resistance to the world, And similar to St. Ambrose, no matter what the secular power was pushing towards at the time, he wouldn't compromise on the foundational beliefs of the church. And that's why he's called the pillar of Orthodox.
You are that next generation, son.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
One minute on Saint Seraphim. You mentioned about how Saint Seraphim Sarab was beaten by the 3 brigands, but he was he refused to even allow them to be arrested. And so his attitude of humility and forgiveness was just amazing.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And I would just say, just for Constantine, after he converted, it still was not widespread Christianity. It was just really a tolerance. And he took a lot of political flack for it. There was the courage to do that. And even then, it still took another 200 years for finally the empire to convert under Theodosius II, which when finally they became a fully Christian, which then led foundation for the Merovingian and then the Charlemagne. So, and for me, the reason I took Constantine is that he was still a very flawed character and still had a kind of an old way and then converting into the new way and having to break all those bad habits and still have to deal with the all the politics and everything like that. So I really, that's the same for me. You gotta break with the past, gotta break with all the bad habits, be a leader, be an example.
His mother was a big part of that, though.
Yep.
His mother was a pushing force on that deal.
There's wings in that if you want to eat some wings. Also, the choir needs to get in here so they can warm back.
Do it.
What do you mean?
Let's get all the chairs back.
Chairs. The choir is right here.
All of the choir.
Yeah, there's 3 of us, that's at least half. It's not. You have to do in a very specific way.
I'm gonna pull the chair